Hey, indie filmmakers, I'm Nick Bodmer.
I'm Griffin Hammond, and on this week's episode, I shot the total solar eclipse in Bowling Green, Kentucky.
Plus, your questions about marketing yourself on social media, how to expose for time lapses, and how to mount 2 cameras on 1 tripod.
Hello, Nick.
Griffin, is your vision intact? Did you stare directly at the sun?
I did not stare directly at the sun. I can still see.
Outstanding.
Here, I'll pull out my...
So a rousing success, then.
Oh, yeah, it was a great success. Right now I'm looking through my solar viewers that I have. You had some of these, right?
I had a set of solar viewing glasses. They turned out to be pretty useless, though, as we had thunderstorms all morning.
Oh, so you're in Las Vegas. It was cloudy all day?
Yeah, well, it's not cloudy now. It's blue skies and wonderful. But yeah, all morning we were overcast and rainy. So did not get much eclipse viewing. A little bit, actually, with the glasses. You could kind of see through the clouds,
yeah,
oddly enough. But didn't really get the full experience, which was too bad. I'm bummed about it.
And you were not in the path of the totality, so it never would have gotten dark.
Right, we were getting about 73% coverage of the sun, so I expected it to get 73% darker, but because it was overcast, I didn't really notice any difference.
Right. So here in Kentucky, I came here because I'm in the path of the totality. So at 1:28 p.m. today Central Time, it went completely dark. We went into the shadow of the moon, which is really cool. And that's when a lot of my coolest footage that we'll talk about happened. But it was pretty clear skies. There were a couple clouds. I think as the moon was starting to eclipse over the sun, there were 2 times over that 90-minute period where it blotted out the sun with clouds. But actually, it was kind of cool to have that because I was shooting a time lapse with one camera with my big long lens, and then with the other camera, I was shooting video, and I was able to, I could roll video on those times when the clouds were moving over. So I think that looked cool too.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I got exactly what I was looking for. I was able to borrow a really long lens from Panasonic. I got the 1-400 millimeter.
Oh, awesome. Is that the one I saw the filter kind of taped to?
Yeah. In fact, this was a lens that was probably in last week's episode because Dan Cox, who I was working with in Alaska, he's a photographer, he uses that lens as a wildlife lens. It's perfect. Zoom in telephoto lens, and it's one of the longest lenses, maybe the longest lens that Panasonic makes for the native Micro Four Thirds sensor. So it's an 800 millimeter equivalent, unlike Canon glass, and so I was able to get a pretty tight shot of the sun much of the time.
That's awesome. So okay, so you had 2 cameras, one with the 400 millimeter. I assume you're shooting at 400 millimeters all the way zoomed in.
Yeah, pretty much. Although here's what was kind of funny. My time lapse, as I export it now, the way that it looks, it's interesting. It's kind of zigzagging back and forth because when I was zoomed in that much, the sun would only stay in the frame for maybe 5 to 8 minutes.
Oh yeah, it's moving in the sky.
Right, it's moving kind of up towards the peak of the sky and then a little bit back down, but it's generally moving to the right through my frame. So I just kept panning the shot to catch up to it. But now I'll either need to, I think there's 2 ways I could do this. I could either run the whole thing through like warp stabilizer so that it just stays in one place.
Yep.
Or I could kind of like zoom everything out and try to take these different segments of video and superimpose them in the right area, move one up and to the right and move up one a little bit more up to the right, and maybe just have one solid piece of video where the sun kind of arcs across the sky as a time lapse.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that would be kind of cool.
So I have those 2.
Sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, it'll be work. But at the moment, just to watch the straight out of the camera time lapse is pretty fun. It kind of looks like Pac-Man, like running across the screen.
And so you shot a time lapse with that super close-up one. Were you able to get decent exposure all the way through, or are you having to adjust on the fly? What'd you do?
I was pretty consistent. Let me look at my actual settings. I think I was at f6.3 the whole time, which is probably pretty close to what the camera wanted to do for, having a zoom lens like that. I don't have like a super wide open. Let's see. It looks like I was shooting f6.3. I was shooting a 1/250 shutter speed.
Okay.
And I was shooting at ISO 800. and I have my really thick, like, solar filters on.
Yeah, so it was a very like you needed ISO 800 just to.
Right. Well, I was bumping it up because I wanted to be able to use a pretty fast shutter, because I was worried that when I'm zoomed in that much, even with the dual image stabilization on this camera, you know, it's like the ground is moving a little bit and the camera's like just barely.
The wind blowing, and things like that. Yeah.
So I just wanted to make sure I was using a fast enough shutter that I'm getting crystal clear images.
Sure.
So I'm bumping up I may have even bumped up the aperture, closed down the aperture a little bit, because I want to even, I want to be able to second guess my own focus a little bit and just make sure I'm not all the way wide open. So I'm a little bit closed down, a little bit faster shutter, but I still want to get some of the like bloom of light. I don't want it to just be a ball of color. I want to actually see some glow, so that I was able to get that at 800 ISO.
Now, what about during totality? Was it still exposing that same settings, or did you have to pull the filter off, or what'd you do?
Yeah, it had to be completely different, which was kind of crazy. One, I stopped shooting time-lapse. I'd been shooting a time-lapse with an 18-second interval, and people sometimes wonder how I come up with these numbers. I kind of looked at the fact that it's going to be an hour and a half from when the moon starts to cross over the sun to when we get to totality. And if I imagine I probably want to see that in like a 5-second time lapse, then I have 5 seconds times 30 frames per second. That's 600 images. Wait, no, 300 images, sorry. And so I can just do the math, divide 90 minutes by 300 images, and it was like 18 seconds.
Oh, okay.
So I did an 18-second interval. I let it run that whole time. I was shooting raw images. But then I figure everything during totality might happen kind of quickly. I don't want to just keep doing a time lapse. So right when it got to a pretty small sliver of sun left, and we're about to lose the sun entirely, I stopped doing time lapse, started doing video in 4K.
Yep.
And I'm using the extended teleconversion feature, so I'm able to get a little bit tighter crop on the sun.
Yep.
But even until the very last moment, I think it started to get such a small sliver that I was like, it's time to pull off the solar filter.
Sure.
And I pulled it off, and the first thing that happened was it was really bright, and I was like, oh, we're not there yet. So I kind of put it back on. But then when it got even smaller, I pulled it off again and realized not only do I need to pull it off, but like these solar filters, I think they knock out 99% of the light. So they are intense.
So you needed you had to change all your settings.
Yeah, so my settings had to change. So I think I closed some things down. I probably closed down the aperture and sped up the shutter even more, just to get an appropriate amount of corona glow and all of that stuff.
And were you able to see all the wispy corona and there's beads or something that people talk about?
Yeah, I think I was able to get, I don't know about the beads, but I definitely saw the corona, and I was kind of messing with the aperture to see like, will I see more detail if I go darker? But it all looked really cool. And then I just left those settings intact for as it started to come out of totality. A minute later, we had about a minute of totality in this part of Kentucky. And as it starts to come out, it does this thing called the diamond ring effect, where it starts to bloom on one side, and that looked pretty cool too.
That's awesome. So then once totality was over, did you go back to shooting another time lapse, or what did you do?
Well, I threw the solar filter back on and kept going. Well, I think I may have shot some video. I think I started to shoot a time lapse, and then I realized like I don't really care about the time lapse. I already did that on the way in.
Right. Just reverse it.
Yeah, exactly. So I think I shot a few photos so I could kind of fill out the phases. But at that point, I'd gotten so much cool stuff. I was like, I think I'm done.
Gotcha. And so that was your primary camera with the long lens. What were you doing with the other camera?
The other GH5 I was shooting with, I had a 35 to 100 millimeter. So one of my longer lenses, but not that long. When you zoom in at 100 and see the sun, it's still pretty small in the sky.
Sure.
But I thought that one would be fun to get some additional video. So especially when the clouds were moving past the sun and one camera's busy doing time lapse, I let the other camera shoot some video.
Now, were you in a position where, I was reading about this today, like right before totality, you get a 360-degree like sunrise look?
I did not even realize that until some people said it after, so I missed that.
Oh, bummer. Yeah, I mean, I was like, oh god, that'd be cool.
You know how they always warn you, like, don't with something like this awesome, don't get too caught up in your cameras, and you should really experience it as a human and all that.
You got caught up in your cameras.
Oh, I was completely caught up. But it was so much fun. I gave myself a big challenge near the end. I made this way more complicated than it had to be. I'm already shooting with 2 cameras, so I think at this point I'm shooting video on both cameras, and I have to take the solar filters off both. But I decided to add a wrinkle to this and also shoot with a drone during the totality.
During the 1 minute you have to do
so
all this?
I knew I would screw this up if I tried to like take off during totality and all that. So here was my plan. 2 minutes before totality, I think I've already taken my camera out of photo mode. I'm now shooting video, just rolling video. Yep. I'm ready to go there. I turn on the DJI Spark, my little quadcopter, and I just fly it up in the air. I'm actually on the campus of Western Kentucky University.
Okay.
So there's a bunch of students outside watching, waiting for this to happen. And so I fly the drone up, maybe 100 feet or something, and I'm looking down at all the students right on campus. Not every student, but this one part of campus. And I'm just waiting because I want to see the shadow come across.
Yeah.
So I just start the drone rolling and I just leave it in place. It's up there and it's making its noise, but not too much noise.
Technology is amazing, isn't it? You're like, all right, flying camera platform I can ignore while I do other things.
Yeah, so I left it up there, and then as we went into totality, then I went over to my cameras, took off the filters. I'm still keeping an eye on the drone, and then I'm flying it back and forth a little bit just to get some movement. It's not like a hard shadow that moves across when the moon comes. It all was pretty gradual,
it's pretty
darkening.
diffuse,
But it still was cool. I should have put the drone into manual mode, because then I'd really see a major darkening.
It was auto exposing, so as it got darker, it adjusted for you.
Yeah, although you still see a color shift, you see the shadows disappear. I was worried that if I put it in manual, I would just screw it up. Like it would just get so dark or something, I wouldn't see it.
Yeah, especially when you've got 600 other things you're trying to do at one time.
Right, but in the end, I was able to get really cool shots of how dark it got from the drone. I got great video on the 1 to 400 millimeter lens. The only thing I probably should have done differently was, instead of leaving my 35 to 100 on the second camera, I probably should have thrown my 12 to 35 on. I had been throughout the day shooting some stuff in daylight with that, but it would have been cool to get some people during totality. I don't have any video of people, well, I guess besides the drone, of people experiencing it.
Right. Well, in 30 years or whatever, when it happens again, you'll be ready.
Right. But I think I'm very happy with what I got. It's stuff I can relive, and I can edit it and have fun with it.
When do you think we'll get a little sneak peek of this stuff?
I'm hoping that actually by the time this podcast airs, I will have already put out a little like story of the day.
Oh, beautiful.
We'll see.
So right now we're recording the day of the eclipse in the evening, and so you've got a day or so to put that together. When do you fly home?
Going home tomorrow. Couldn't stay long. I have work to do at home, but it was cool just to be part of this.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm a little bit jealous.
Yeah.
I was thinking I'd get a good view in my yard, but didn't happen.
Well, now you get to you'll get to experience it vicariously through my footage,
which is all I ever really need.
The other thing that I wish I had captured, this was another reason I probably should have taken my second camera off the tripod, is, have you heard of sun snakes?
No.
They're like this phenomenon that happens, like these wavy lines appear on the ground right before and after totality.
Oh, I read something briefly about that today, and like scientists can't explain it or something.
Yeah, I don't know if there's much of an explanation for it. But I saw it with my eyes before and after on the ground in front of me. I just didn't have a free camera to point down at the ground and get it.
That's a phrase you don't hear from Griffin Hammond very often. I didn't have a free camera.
Right. Actually, I feel like that happens to me a lot. I'm not really like the quickest, most adaptable shooter. I like to set things up and make it pretty. And I mean, I guess I consider myself run and gun, but like when it comes to like newsy sort of things, you know, if there was a an attack somewhere, I'm the last person that's going to get great footage of it.
What else can you tell us about the eclipse?
Well, we got a question. This was a tweet I got from Justin Schwebel, who was just wondering if I had any tips. He asked me this earlier, so I actually already got back to him before the eclipse, but he was wondering about shooting the eclipse with the GH3 and with his DJI Phantom 3. And I think he's up in Connecticut. So I told him, you know, with the GH3, get solar film if you can, then you can actually shoot some stuff. But my concern was that the DJI Phantom wouldn't actually get anything particularly interesting, because that field of view, you're not going to see the sun. It's just going to be a little dot in the sky.
Right.
And so I would not have expected that I would use mine during the eclipse, and then just realized, oh, an aerial shot of kind of the reverse shot of the sun. What's happening on the ground, that could actually be interesting.
From the moon's point of view, almost.
I even tried at one point, I thought a really cool shot would be looking up at the eclipse moon through my solar film. What if I fly the drone up and it becomes like a little drone silhouette in front of the sun?
You should do that.
Well, I tried it. That was the last thing I tried, but I just couldn't get it. I think I'm focused on...
You have such a small area, yeah.
And I think I'm focused on infinity with a really long lens, so even at f6.3, you're getting really shallow depth of field, you know, relative to the fact that I'm focused on infinity. So I think I was seeing the drone, but it was just like a black... like
blur.
Yeah, just it didn't even feel like anything. It felt like light. It felt like a shadow.
Should we answer some questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it.
You want to read our first one?
Yeah, we got a tweet from Droy Media. That's our pal Adam, right?
Mm-hmm. That's Adam, who was
going?
on what episode? I don't remember which episode it was. It was the one about taxes.
Yeah, the boring one I wasn't on.
No, people loved that episode. They loved Adam.
They did. I'm just kidding, Adam. Any tips, tricks, or tools you guys recommend for filmmakers to promote themselves on social media?
I think this is something that always comes up at like trade shows and stuff. People always want to know how to build an audience. And I don't think I'm like the expert on social media, building an audience, promoting yourself. But I think one good way to approach it is not thinking about it as promoting yourself.
Yep.
Because I think that audiences feel that. They're like, oh, what do you want out of this? You're doing this because you want something. So I like to approach it as, how can I help? You know, can I answer questions from the audience? Can I share things I've learned? I think generally if you are giving back on social media, if you're in a giving mood, positivity comes back to you.
Yeah, and I think heavy interaction helps too, right? You don't just want to keep throwing stuff out there and not being involved in the conversation, not responding to people, things like that. So I think getting engaged with the people on social media is valuable and important.
Oh yeah, for two reasons. Not only for the like nice personal connection, but actually like you're rewarded for it on social media. Like I think when I reply to someone on YouTube, it goes out to feeds and says, Griffin Hammond replied to so-and-so on this video, and then more people might find the video. That happens on Twitter. So yeah, engagement is important.
For me, doing wedding videos, one of the things that if I were going to continue doing them more, which I'm really not, but if I were, I always thought it would be a great idea to, like when I do a highlight film for a bride, to post it through like my wedding company's Facebook page and have them just share that. Be like, here's your video, and they can share it on Facebook, but it's linked to like Nick Bodmer Videography. Oh yeah, you know, as who it's from. Again, if you're using copyrighted music, that doesn't work. But if you're being good and using non-copyrighted music, I think that should be fine. And one last thing is that I think about with social media is this idea of tastemakers. Have you heard this phrase? Yes. I think this is something I would talk about in some of my trade show presentations, is just the idea that on social media, you're not just developing things for your primary audience, but if you can get a tastemaker, someone with an audience, a bigger audience than yours, to talk about it, then that's how things can go viral. So I always kind of have that in the back of my head. If I'm making something that I'm hoping will be popular, it's like, I'm making this primarily to help people and teach something. But if this would interest nofilmschool.com, or if it would interest a different YouTuber or like photography website, that's the kind of thing that will get shared, and you'll find a bigger audience that way. Yeah, absolutely. But it all comes down to putting valuable content out there people are interested in, right?
Yeah. I think the key thing to think about is, like, would you watch this? Like, are you making this to make yourself feel good about yourself, or are you making it because it's actually something that's worth watching?
Yep.
Here's a tweet that I got from I Am Jill. And the question, this is a good question for you, Nick. When we do weddings, do you film all the photo posing? It feels redundant, like there's something better I could be doing.
Yeah, it can get pretty boring, that part. I film parts of it, especially when it's just like the bride and the groom. That's a chance to get some pretty good shots. But I'm more interested in the interaction of people as they're getting posed or moving to and from. You get some of that motion as opposed to a shot of everyone looking forward smiling. So it's a good opportunity to maybe punch in on a group and just get a couple people interacting or smiling at each other. And so you look for those candid moments during that time is what I do.
That is the perfect advice, because I often think it could be boring if I was just capturing exactly the same shots that the photographer's getting. But I have to remind myself, the photographer is getting these beautiful stills, and I'm looking for movement. So it's not going to happen when they're all smiling and saying cheese. It is going to happen in those in-between candid moments. And that's a great time for slow motion and using your glide cam to run up on them while the photographer... I mean, one, I don't want to get in the photographer's shot, so I wait for the photographer to kind of finish. And while he or she is saying, hey, let's, maybe I'll go over here, that's when I'll run in and get a moving shot.
Absolutely. Yeah, I used to do the thing where it's like, okay, I'll sit up right next to the photographer, and as everyone's staring at the photographer, I'll pan down on the whole group, and then I'll pan up on the next group,
Me too,
and I'll pan left, and I'll pan right. And then, like, pretty quick, when you're editing, you realize, like, these shots are super boring, and you never want to use them, so why are you shooting them?
Right.
So you kind of stop. One shot you do want to look for, bride and groom, at some point, they're always going to say, okay, now kiss. And if you're zoomed in and ready for that moment, always a good shot.
Yeah. And depending on the photographer you're working with, some photographers are so good at directing and the art direction of creating a really beautiful moment. So I wouldn't write off the photo posing entirely, because if you have a talented photographer, they're going to set up some gorgeous opportunities for you.
Yep, totally agree.
Although sometimes I feel like I'm just stealing their great creativity.
Nothing wrong with that.
I didn't do this. I didn't make this happen, but I'm here with my camera.
I do that all the time when they set up the cool little things with, like, the rings or all the little accessories. I'm like, hey, can I get a shot of that thing you just set up? Because that looks awesome. All right, we got a YouTube comment from Mike Robel. Griffin, how do you figure out the exposure for the moonrise time lapse? Did the exposure change before and after moonrise? I assume this is the moonrise time lapse you put out last week from your time in Alaska.
Yeah, that was fun. I think one of the things I love about shooting time lapses like that is that they don't matter too much. Like, if I had screwed it up, it wouldn't have changed anything. It was just kind of like for fun. I thought, let me try shooting the moon, and I knew where the moon would come out based on this Sky Viewer app that I was using.
Mm-hmm.
But really, I just guessed on everything. I didn't have a good idea of how to expose for it. I kind of just pointed at where the moon was going to be, set it to, I think, a 10-second exposure. I can't even remember what ISO I was at or what shutter speed. Well, my shutter speed was 10 seconds. I don't know what my aperture was. And I just took a test shot. I always take test shots before I start doing the time lapse. I just take a few shots and I kind of look through the viewfinder. I think in the end, I probably thought that I was filming a little bit brighter than I was, but I think my eyes had adjusted to the dark so much. This is one time I should have been relying a little bit more on the histogram and all that. But I knew it'd be like a pretty dark shot until the moon came up. But I was getting some color, and I started to see a little bit of color in the clouds before the moon came up. So it looked like it'd be pretty good. When it actually came up, I think I was a little bit surprised in the moment how bright the moon appeared.
Sure.
So it's like, I think while shooting it, I both had thoughts of like, oh, this should be brighter or this should be darker, and probably just dumb luck, I kind of landed roughly in the middle of where I needed to be. And I was shooting raw, so I had some ability in post to kind of push it to where I wanted it to be. So it came out good, but not because I did anything super intelligent.
And just to be clear, though, you set one exposure for the entire time lapse and just rolled it.
Right, that's important to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I could have done aperture priority or shutter priority or something and let the camera adjust on the fly, but my fear is that it's just going to come out really stuttery.
Yep.
It's better just to have a consistent exposure the whole time and let the light change as it does and experience that.
Yep.
Here is a YouTube comment we got from Ritesh. This is for you, Nick. How much do you like your G85?
I like it like a 7, maybe an 8.
7 or 8 out of 10.
No, it's great. You know, coming from a much older GH2 G6, huge upgrade. It's the first time my primary camera's ever had 2 dials, which probably makes you laugh, but it's a huge quality of life upgrade.
Oh yeah,
to be able to adjust shutter
the
and
GH2
aperture.
only had the front dial.
Yeah,
and not the rear
so,
dial. Wow, I forgot.
So I'd have to hold down a function button, you know, so if I'm in manual mode, I could only adjust shutter or aperture without holding down a button.
You know, in a way, I'd kind of like that again, because I've thought about it'd be nice to like lock the rear dial, because I think or even both maybe.
Like you bump it?
Yeah, sometimes I bump it, and for the kind of work I do, I almost never want to change my shutter speed for video.
Yeah.
So I almost want to like not have that one right there, but...
Well, I like it for photos especially.
Yeah,
it's
for
super
photos,
handy.
yeah.
Only thing I don't like, it's actually a little hard to tell when I've hit the record button. It's kind of a very soft, and the button is recessed, and it's like, did I start recording?
Yeah.
Especially when you're not in a spot to really look really well at the camera.
Yeah. So you're saying it's easy to
that's
tell
fine.
on the LCD, you just aren't always looking at the LCD.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're always doing, you know, when you're doing 6,000 things
Right, yeah.
at once. But no, for the most part, it's fantastic. Great image quality. The image stabilization is amazing. I'm looking at the camera now like it's going to tell me something. Having the SD card slot back on the side and not in with the battery is really, I don't know why, but I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it.
Well, Ritesh
There's
wants
my
you to make a
review.
review, so...
That's it. I just did it.
Yeah, we'll just cut this
Cut
part of the
this
video.
out. Nick's review. Nick's review, yeah.
This is a
Well,
tweet...
you know, I'm a video maker now. You know, my tutorial has over 2,000 views. No big deal.
You've always been a video maker. You're just kind of new to the sharing what you've learned on YouTube game.
Yeah, that was kind of fun though.
Yeah.
You know, my next video is going to be, I think, I ordered a new Synology NAS. So I was thinking maybe how to set up the Synology NAS video would be good.
Yeah, I think people would like that.
And I tell you, I bought 2 more of those hard drives. So now I've got 4 8-terabyte drives.
Right, yeah, those 8-terabyte hard drives we talked about a couple episodes ago, they were on sale when we bought them. Now they're back on sale. Are they still on sale? I don't know. We never know.
Yeah. By the time this comes out, I'm not sure. But yes, right now. I tweeted about it.
Yeah.
159 again.
So how many of them do you have now?
4.
Wow. So now you can do your dream of making the... Like, now you have all that you need, right?
Yes. Yeah.
To make
and
a
new
raid
NAS.
out of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So it'll be wonderful.
Cool.
24 terabytes usable storage.
Wow. Here's a tweet that we got from Umberto, and wondering how I mount 2 cameras on a single tripod. He's actually, I think he was looking at a photo I shared on last week's episode. When I was in Alaska, I recorded 2 cameras. I didn't even do a particularly great job. Did you notice my 2 shots?
I did not.
Like my primary shot with my prime lens, doing the normal podcast shot that I normally do for the video. And then I mounted a second GH5 camera body onto the tripod with my 12 to 35 millimeter lens. So it was the same focal length. They're both at 12. One just had more depth of field than the other.
Yeah.
But I did that so that when I talked to Dan next to me, when he came over, he could actually like be in focus. And although I'm not even sure I got him in focus because I didn't do it live. I kind of did it, I preset it. But it wasn't the most beautiful shot, but it was nice that I could mount both. I just used the Pedco Ultra Clamp.
So for those of you who don't know, because Griffin never talks about it, what is the Pedco Ultra Clamp?
The Pedco Ultra Clamp is my favorite piece of filmmaking equipment. It's
you need one of those supercuts of all the times of you talking about the Pedco Ultra Clamp.
Yeah, I've even tried to get the attention of Pedco to let them know that I love this product, but I don't think I'm not sure
they are totally uninterested in you.
This is like, it's like Sriracha. It's a product that does not need help. Needs no marketing. It's just a good product. It's cheap. It's only $15 on Amazon usually. Sometimes it's $25. But all it is just a clamp, a plastic clamp with a little ball head on the end. I'm actually using one right now to hold my microphone just out of frame. It's clamped to the microphone my shotgun microphone onto my tripod. I do that all the time. I use it for all sorts of things. But yeah, it can support the camera. It can support an audio recorder. I wholeheartedly recommend the Petco Ultra Clamp.
Bing!
And I'll put a link in the show notes.
Of course you will. That reminds me, I had a little flashback to when we shot Sriracha the other day.
What was the flashback?
You know the larger bottles of Sriracha? They have like the normal size and then the kind of the big one. That's what we've had for, God, I mean, we've probably had that bottle for 8 months or something like that, right? Because they last forever. And I was going to recycle
20 ounces or 24 ounces.
Yeah, something like that. And I was rinsing it out because we're going to recycle it. And I don't think I'd ever rinsed out a Sriracha bottle before. Right. I don't know if my wife had done it or if we just throw them out. But I was rinsing it and as I like shook it up with water and dumped it out, like my eyes started burning, and it smelled like we were back in that factory where they made the Sriracha. And I was like, this is the smell of the whole factory.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Anyway. So you're not even saying you got any on you. It's just the act of splashing water around inside and then dumping it out. It makes that really, like, thick pepper spray.
Exactly.
Sort of
it's like a cloud of pepper spray almost. Yeah.
Yeah. I noticed that, too. Every time I wash out a bottle, it's kind of intense.
Yeah. Anyway, and it reminded me of that first factory we went to, because at that time they had not moved over production to the new factory.
Yeah.
We went to the old one.
Well, yeah, anytime we were around the actual pepper grinding, when we were in the pepper grinding room, it was intense.
Absolutely. We got a YouTube comment from Vladimir's vlog, talking again about backup, which is my favorite topic. Have you heard of Backblaze.com? Any thoughts on it? Yes, I have heard of Backblaze.com. I think they are excellent. I have mentioned I use CrashPlan, which is a similar online backup service. Primarily, I use CrashPlan because they have a family plan where you can have up to 10 devices, and I just have a million devices mixed around, and it's just a little bit better value. And also, CrashPlan will do NAS devices and things like that, whereas Backblaze at this point does not. But for the basic computer backup and backing up things that are directly attached to your computer, like external hard drives, Backblaze is a fine option, and they do a good job.
And I imagine you are happy to hear that people are backing up things. Generally.
I am. I mean, losing data is just the worst feeling in the world. Like, I know I have some like college photos and before that I didn't properly back up, and they're just gone, and it makes me sad.
Yeah. Well, and you always say that the important thing about backing up is to have automatic backup, because if it's not automated, then you probably won't be doing it.
Exactly. It'll never be when you need it. So
do you know if Backblaze does that too?
It does. It does. It runs in the background on your Mac or PC and backs everything up. It used to be Mac only, but I think now they are Mac and PC. Here's
a YouTube comment we got from Daniel Phillips. Griffin, can you talk a little bit about the process when filming people in public? Do you always ask permission, or do you just shoot until someone says otherwise? Nick, do you remember when we filmed people in public for Sriracha in Chicago?
Yeah, at the Taste of Chicago, right?
Yeah.
Griffin is very aggressive. He is totally unwilling to give anyone any privacy.
This does not sound like me at all.
No, that's not true. It's not true.
In fact, you and I were both pretty uncomfortable
timid.
talking to people in public.
I don't like imposing on people for some reason. So.
That's what I feel like. I feel like I'm causing a disruption to their life. I don't want to be doing that.
Yeah.
But at least I am much more comfortable asking someone to be in something. And once you get their permission, then yeah, you film an interview with them. I like interviews because they're fully on board with it. I am totally uncomfortable with the idea of going out in public with a zoom lens and just taking photos of people or video. In fact, you always kind of need that for pieces. Like, hey, you need an establishing shot of a space with people walking around. And it makes me really uncomfortable if I can like see people's faces clearly. I don't want to do that. I don't like doing that. I'm not even so concerned about the legal part. I just kind of like don't want them to catch me zooming in on them, you know?
Yeah, you feel like a creep.
Right.
But I mean, I think there are situations where that's going to happen, and that, I mean, you're not in the wrong, I don't think, right?
Yeah, I think the case law kind of goes both ways. You know, if you're in a public place, then people don't have an expectation of privacy. So you can get away with that sort of thing. But I do think that, I'm not a lawyer, but I do think that some cases have shown that you can't just like, zoom in and on one particular person and really focus on them, because now you're like taking their likeness, and what if you put that person's face, it's a medium close up, and you put it in a commercial and you're saying everyone loves Pepsi, look at this guy. It's like that is crossing a line.
And he loves Coke,
right?
Could be bad.
So you do have to be careful about how prominently are you focusing on people in public, and you can always avoid the problem by asking people's permission.
Yep. When in doubt, I think ask permission is probably the better way to go.
Definitely, yeah.
We've got a YouTube comment from I'm Not Crazy Studios. Hey Griffin, with all the technical specs that companies promote to get buyers, it gets really confusing to find out what's actually important when shooting video. So what are the really important features to look at when buying a camera for filmmaking?
That's a great question, because sometimes even with cameras that I like the Panasonic GH5, it shoots 10-bit 422 internal, which a lot of people that sounds great, but I think for most users you probably don't even need that.
Yep.
And so it's important to learn about why does that feature matter? It's color data, and if you need more color data, then you do want 10-bit 422. But we do have a tendency when we talk about products to focus on the numbers. I guess.
And I think in general, the numbers are going to tell you very little, right? I mean, all the major cameras are going to have very similar specs. So, I mean, for me, it's more about going to trusted reviews and really understanding, what it's like to use a camera in practice. That's more important.
Well, yeah, and don't let all the latest tech specs. I mean, all the new cameras are going to have exciting new tech specs. Don't let that distract you from the things that matter, like battery life, and just like the things that you've always dealt with as a videographer.
So let's go through those. What would those be? Battery life. I mean, I guess I'm not going to buy a camera that doesn't do 4K now, right?
Right.
I mean,
so yeah, for most professional projects, you probably do want 4K now, but you don't necessarily need it. So think about why you're shooting. If everything you shoot is 1080, like we shoot the podcast in 1080, then maybe you don't need to get a 4K camera. You probably don't need the highest frame rates for most projects. So you just have to ask yourself, is 60 frames per second important to you to get slow motion?
Image stabilization, I have to say I've become a big fan of that.
And they always talk about megapixels in photography cameras, but at a certain point, if you're not blowing up a photo onto a billboard, you don't need crazy number of megapixels. And especially if you're shooting with a camera only for video, then the megapixels don't really matter. I guess they kind of matter for me for time lapses, but the fact that it's a 20 megapixel camera most of the time has nothing to do with the image quality of my video.
In conclusion, buy the Panasonic GH5.
I think in conclusion, I don't know if you can entirely buy cameras off of tech specs. I think you do have to go try them out. You can always return a camera if you don't like it. You can rent cameras. You can borrow a friend's camera. I think you want to find the camera that fits your style of shooting. So I think the size of a camera is important. The availability of lenses for that camera model.
And let's be honest, if somebody told you could pick a camera but you're going to get a random lens, or you could pick a lens and you're going to get a random camera, you'd rather pick the lens, right? If you've got a project to complete.
Yeah, the lens may have more to do with what your creative output is than what the camera can do.
Yep.
Here's a Facebook comment from Caleb Adams. This is our final question today. And it's a kind of a three-parter. He offers up 3 scenarios for us. And because he's looking to hire a second shooter and just wondering what a fair hourly rate would be. So what are these 3 scenarios? He's talking about...
So one, hiring a beginner with basic knowledge and doesn't come with their own equipment.
Okay.
Then his second scenario is a kind of a middle-of-the-road freelancer and with a basic kit. And the third is a pro who's been doing this for a long time with a full video kit with every little thing you might want.
Right. And so
I think what's Go ahead.
I was going to say some projects, if you need a second shooter, you probably shouldn't be hiring the top professional. I think sometimes I'm asked to do projects that sound like you should not be hiring me for this. I should not be the one who comes and films a recital at a high school single camera. Like that's a misuse of what I do
Your
for a
skill
living.
set.
Like I'm going to charge
Yeah.
you way too much for that when you could hire someone else to do that for $10 probably.
So for me, like, I can just talk about how I've used second shooters, because I have used them quite a bit. So one, we've been second shooters for each other many times, right?
Yes.
Which is kind of works great because we have done video together forever, so we know exactly what the other person is doing and what they're looking for and things like that. But that's not always an option, I guess, right?
Right, no.
Sometimes, you know, I would bring my wife with me, and she's not a video professional, but sometimes you just basically need another body to carry things and to hit record at the right time and maybe make a single pan.
And those kind of people, the people that are not video professionals, usually you need to teach them a few basic things that you might take for granted. Like I would often say to second shooters that I work with that don't have a lot of experience is like, at the wedding, what I need you to do is change the shot, change the zoom or pan if they move, you know, if they move out of frame or they go over there, I need you to reframe it. But what I want you to do is just reframe it and then just stop touching the camera, like get away from it. Because I've had second shooters who kind of keep their hands on the camera and it's like jittery the whole time.
Yeah, it's like, even if you don't get it perfect, just get away from the camera because I need to be able to cut to it.
Right. Yeah, so letting them know why you're using it. It's not like I need a perfect 2-hour shot. I need something to cut away to when I make mistakes.
Right. Yep. I have hired, you know, as I moved to Las Vegas, I had weddings on the books for Chicago, so I did hire another videography team to shoot those for me. Found them online, and when I hired them, I think they were relatively new, and their hourly rate reflected that. As we approach some more recent projects, after they've been doing it for a while, they've been doing very well, and their rates had gone up, and they told me so. Basically said, hey, you know, our skill set is improved, our equipment has improved, and our rate has gone up. And I respected that. I said that makes sense, and we negotiated a higher, more fair rate for what they brought to the table.
Cool. So their first rate, like, were you setting the rate, or they were saying this is what we cost?
It was a negotiation back and forth a little bit. You know,
because this was a weird circumstance. This wasn't like
you know, I'm bringing
I'm
bringing multiple projects to the table. I am looking for just filming. I'm handling the editing. So there was some negotiation there.
Yeah,
but
and you clearly would have paid a lower rate. Well, this wouldn't even have worked if they didn't have their own equipment. Like you weren't going to like send them gear.
Exactly. Yeah, they did have to have their own gear. So you know, it was in the $100 an hour range, right?
Yeah,
which is pretty reasonable. In fact, they were bringing 2 shooters to that rate, so pretty good.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
And that went up recently, and I think it was totally appropriate. In fact, the quality of the footage I got back from them on the most recent project was really excellent.
Great.
It's kind of fun to watch them grow in their skill sets as they work on stuff for me. So
yeah, gear definitely ups the rate. I always consider that my hourly rate kind of includes the fact that I bring all the gear to the table, and I often think, you know, if you're trying to come up with a new rate for someone, if you're hiring someone who's never done this before, just think like, what would it take to get them out of bed and do this? Like if they make $15 an hour at their job, maybe you could pay them $20 an hour, or, you know, 30, or like, what would it take? How special is this different from the normal kind of work they do?
Yeah. But I mean, I think it's safe to assume you can get an assistant with very limited knowledge, no equipment, for in the ballpark of a normal hourly rate, right? Like somewhere in the $20-ish range.
Yeah.
As you start asking people to bring equipment and their own expertise, it's easy to get up $50, $75, $100 an hour. Griffin, I think what is your rate now? $250?
200, yeah.
$200 an hour. And then I'm sure there are people who command much higher rates than that even. So
my concern would be, I've never really had to negotiate prices with a second shooter. I imagine when you were doing this, you don't want to be like so savvy. You don't want to get like the best deal because you don't want them to feel like cheated, right? You don't want anyone to leave unhappy.
Yeah. No, especially when you're not going to be there and you're just asking them to handle the whole thing.
Yeah.
That needs to be a positive relationship. So I was definitely willing to pay the appropriate amount for their talent.
Right. Cool. And those weddings.
This is not an area you really want to skimp on, right?
Right.
Especially when you're not there. If you just need hands, then maybe anyone will do. But if you need someone's artistic ability, you don't want to skimp.
Right. And so you got good stuff.
Very happy.
Yeah, cool. Well, that's it for this week's questions.
Beautiful.
And I don't even know what next week's episode is going to be. Next week will be our 32nd episode.
Magical 32.
Which means...
And you know, take the episode number, divide it by 4, plus 6, and you get something.
Yeah. Well, we'll be back next week, and then the following week we'll take a 1-week break as we do every 8 episodes. But for now, we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
I should read the script. Marketing yourself on social media, how to expose your time lapses, and how to mount 2 cameras on 1 tripod. Okay, I'm ready.
Cool. Okay.